it's Jessie Sage. Welcome back to another episode of When We're Not Hustling, the After Party. This is the last one in September, which means that this is Melodie KG's last one with us, but we have really enjoyed having you. It's been very fun.
It's been so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was fun to have you last season as your own guest, but we like to bring people back to, it's fun. It's fun to create community around the show. So,
For sure.
I
uh,
really have enjoyed the conversations.
mhm. We're talking about Stephanie Parent today, but why don't you two just quickly introduce yourselves and then we will move on to Stephanie's interview.
I'm Emily. I'm the producer. It is my job to remind you to like, subscribe, follow us, share us, do all the stuff.
And I'm Melodie KG, sex worker, consultant, nonprofit leader, and
Sure.
writer.
You wear a lot of hats.
So many
Columnist.
hats. Columnist.
Columnist, yeah. So we interviewed Stephanie Parent and she is a dominatrix and a writer, and she wrote a gothic horror novel set in a real dungeon that she worked in LA that supposedly is haunted by the founding madam, which is a cool story. And it was really interesting to talk to her about the process of writing a novel about a place that she's actually worked.
Yeah.
It was really interesting. Especially being a writer myself who's just starting to really get into the world of publishing, hearing her experiences and how she navigates and has navigated like putting her real name on pieces of her intellectual property versus using a sex worker name or like a different pseudonym, because I think those are the things that we as sex workers have additional kind of security concerns around, obviously. So and that's something I continue to grapple with my own work, right? It's like, well, do I release this under Melody or under another name, and which one and why? And
Right.
so, yeah, it was really good to hear her kind of outline her process for that.
Yeah, that's obviously something that I've dealt with too. And I think it's actually really hard. Those decisions are really hard to make. And they're not just like we don't actually have like total power over that either. It's like you have if when you start working in like mainstream publishing, also you have to she dealt with this with the Huffington Post and I dealt with it with the Washington Post, which is like they will tell you like no, we're not going to do this unless you give us your real name. And I know that other sex workers have also dealt with that, which seems bananas because I know there are lots of writers who are not using their real names, and like Stoya wrote for the New York Times a bunch of times under Stoya. Stoya is not Stoya's real name. We know this because she wrote about it in Gisli's book, Coming Out Like a Porn Star. So there is precedent for sex workers using their sex working names. And right now, like my column and everything is under Jessie Sage, which is my former online sex working persona, which turned into my intellectual work persona. But yeah, but then when I started escorting, I created a whole nother brand. And the reason that I did that is because I wanted people to be able to find my writing and to be able to find my ads. And you don't want everything all connected because then people who are looking for one thing can't find it's so complicated.
Yeah. I'm not a sex worker. I'm just a performer. But I ran into this. I published my first album under my stage name, Emma Lee, kept it simple, still technically my name, but you can't find me. I could avoid being doxxed if I didn't want to. But
Emma,
then
Emma Lee. It's very
right, it's like, okay, it's close enough, and like it won't be weird if people call me Emma. I'm like, okay, me through music. And then I found out there was another Emily, so that was a publishing conflict. I released the second album under the Emily Project. And then I wrote books, and it turns out I'm publishing books. Even if you're just self-publishing poetry, it's a whole different scene. And so ended up publishing those under Emily Foster. And eventually but it's kind of messy, right? Now I've got music under two different names and I've got poetry under this name. I'm doing this podcast here. I've got different, it's like,
It is.
and it all started from this, like, oh, I'd like to have some privacy. But then it turned out to be so complicated that I was like, okay, screw privacy. Like, God, can we just get this done? Yeah.
Things and stuff like that. So then you set up a Cash App and a Venmo, and like, what name do you do that under? But then when you transfer
Right.
that stuff to your bank, you're giving your bank your sex worker. It's like so
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah. No, my banks threw fits over checks written to Emily because someone bought a CD with a check, and it's just like,
Mhm.
I assure you it's me. It's $8. Come on.
Someone wrote a check to you for $8.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I also got, before I fixed my settings on my publishing for music, I would get checks periodically from CD Baby for like 30 cents because
Oh
it was
yeah,
the accumulated pay from all of Spotify or some
ridiculous.
shit. Like, yeah.
Thank you.
I've gotten some stupid small checks, like really cute.
So funny.
Yeah, it's more complicated than you think it's gonna be.
Yeah, it really is. And considering how to publish things in the world without the complication of being doxxed as doing a job that is illegal and also dangerous for everyone to know about. Like,
Right.
it's already complicated. And then, like,
Mhm.
add that in, and I can't even imagine. Like, yeah, it's really well and fine to sit there and be like, oh, yeah, I'm out. It's like, well, like, you can't be too out. Like, we don't need people
Right.
showing up at your house, like, like,
That in other ways that like I didn't, so I don't have any real name social media profiles because it's too hard because they cross anyways and Facebook is Facebook. But here's the problem with that. So I have a Facebook because I want people to read my columns. So like that kind of mainstream thing, like you want to put over on Facebook, right? So I
yeah,
have this Jessie Sage. But now, like, I want to sell a desk. Now I put it on Facebook Marketplace. Now I'm basically inviting people to my house and giving them, and I'm like, this is a mess. This is so hard.
yeah,
We
yeah,
live in a world where everything is so like digitally connected, and that actually makes it really, really complicated.
yeah,
Yeah, I remember rookie hooker mistake that I made several years ago. Um, was I remember putting up a quick ad in my local board and accidentally used my phone number, like my real phone number, not my sideline phone number. And I was also concurrently like on a public committee with that same phone number listed like on a PDF on like hosted on like a government site. So if you Google search that number, honey, both of those things came up and
right.
it was a mess. It was awful. And even like to this day, I'm having to like try and make up for that. It's a phone number I no longer use, thank goodness. But like there was a period where I had to like clear some caches, do some like, having to
Yeah,
ask the hoster of the website to take off my post, but it's archived, like all of the things, and it's there forever.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
some of that stuff is automatic that like it's hard. It's hard to manage all of that. Like if you just write a phone number, you like write the first one that you think of, and then you're like, oh damn, that's not the right one.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's our lives are complicated. You know, one of the things that I found so interesting, and I did a lot of reflecting on this, about her interview is she was talking about the fact that this is a horror novel, and so she had to think through and exaggerate the bad situations that she had at work. And that I think would be very difficult, like projecting like what's the worst thing that can happen psychologically. But also, and we had a brief discussion about this, also kind of counterintuitive because we as in like most women who've experienced trauma, which is most women, um, downplay their own like experiences too, to like normalize things for themselves so they're not so that we don't feel so traumatized by it. And she's doing the exact opposite thing. And I thought there was something really interesting about that.
Yeah, almost like leaning into it.
Mhm.
Um, which,
Yeah.
as someone who is also a sex worker and a writer, like sometimes you make the best, and I mean, you know this as a creator too, Emily, like sometimes you make the best stuff by like really leaning into the dark, the
Yeah.
dark parts of it, right?
Yeah.
And yeah. Um, and you just have to hope that you have strong enough will, good enough support system to like bring you back from that. But
Right. Right.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she wrote a ghost story. And then in addition to that, she invited her own sort of drama ghosts to haunt her.
Yeah.
And like, I love horror. I love, modern horror more than Gothic, but I love it. I love all of it. It's what I read. It's how I relax. I watch the movies, all of it. And I consider that a lot when I think about writing. I'm like, I love reading it, but I don't know if I can steep in it in the way that you would have to write it. Like, my songs tend to be a lot lighter and happier. They come from very, very deeply traumatized and dark shadow spaces, but they don't sound that way. And I think about it a lot. Like, I would love to write a horror story. I can. I just leave that to Stephen King and move on.
But
But
there's
yeah,
interesting about leaning into that, like you're saying,
right.
and like I know doing like like knowingly doing a job that is dangerous, which a lot of people do. This is not exclusive to sex work. Like I remember getting a flat tire and having the AAA guy tell me about what his nights look like and was like, I can't believe you do this job. And I'm like, okay, I'm a hooker, but like your job terrible. You can get hit on the side of the road. What are you doing out here? And but like I think doing a dangerous job, part of what you have to do to like get up and go and do that is kind of bracket that off because most of the time it's going to go just fine and does go just fine, provided that you can turn down clients and that you have like the ability to just all of the things that we know like say help mitigate danger, but there still is danger. And I think that we have to kind of put this aside and be like, okay, but I'm still going to go to work today and I'm going to do everything I can to mitigate risk. But also, we know that it's not foolproof, right? So that's even if you're not thinking about it consciously, that's something that you're always doing. So I think that there's something um very brave about actually taking it out and looking at it and not tucking it away.
Yeah. Yeah. Being haunted by it every day,
Mhm.
waking up and being like, wake up, ghosts. I need more of your bullshit. And then whatever you give me, I'm going to make it worse. I'm going to write it down on paper and make it real. Like, oh, that's very brave.
Yeah. Interestingly, like
Yeah.
I like horror when I was younger, like preteen, early teen, and then when I got to be like later teen, 20s, and then now, like especially as a parent, like I don't like horror anymore because I don't want to be scared just for the fun of it. And I think part of that was because life started to feel like more real and more scary to me than when it was all abstract to me. And I was like, oh, I just want to be like, it's fun. And I'm like, it's not fun to be scared for me. And
Right.
so I yeah, there I don't even know like what to say about this except that like I have been thinking about like what it takes and what it means to like really face fears in like a very real way.
And this
Yeah.
reminds me too of the conversation we had with one of the previous guests on this podcast who was talking about like monster core as like a
Hmm.
smut.
Adri Rose.
Adrian Rose, yes. Um, like being able to wrestle with like a demon internally, and then, you know, as an artist, it's kind of you're almost compelled to internally wrestle with that and then put that on a page or on a canvas or in a song or whatever that looks like. Um, and that manifestation of a monster as like a sexual kind of gratifying thing. It almost feels it feels very similar to me to you know, writing a ghost story about a haunted dungeon, right? It's like that grappling with um this, as you said, Emily, this like haunting.
Yeah. For me, the appeal of horror was always that my life may be horrific, but it didn't have monsters in it.
Yeah.
So, like,
Mhm.
yay, let's take all these traumatized feelings and put them over here on these dragons and these aliens and these things that aren't real. But yeah, that did, but it does invite that grappling with the internal, there's a reason that I'm attracted to being scared and being, off put and these terrible situations where like nothing else matters except survival. It's like, right, okay, so
You get to like outsource those feelings in a way.
yeah,
Separate
yeah, absolutely.
and
And then when it comes back to mine, I can always compare it, right? Where I can be like, oh, that was good. That taught me a lot about my feelings of abandonment. At least I wasn't abandoned by my family moving off planet. Like there can be a little, oh, that would be worse. Okay.
Right.
Aviva Ruse on episode 1 of this season, she was talking, and I, in line with what you're saying, she was talking about when she got terribly burned and was like trying to recover from that. And then she said that at that time she got into true crime,
Right.
and that
Yeah.
to me, even though I don't like to be scared, I'm like, oh yeah, because she's like there with her whole back burned off, going through a really, really long healing process. And she's like, well, at least I'm not being chased by
Right.
yeah,
At least I'm not being stalked.
no, I'm sitting in my apartment. I'm fine.
Yeah.
And
100%.
Oh,
that's very interesting. Like that whole what you're saying, what Aviva was saying, like what Stephanie is doing, I think too. We all interact with our trauma and our fears in like different ways. And I think and try to gain mastery or like power over them. And leave it to like a BDSM practitioner to like show us how to do that.
no
Yes.
kidding. Yeah. Okay, that's the perfect place to end this one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Melody, thank you for joining us this month. It was very fun to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And
Seriously.
yeah. And I'm Jessie Sage, and this is When We're Not Hustling the After Party.
I'm Emily Foster. Like, subscribe, follow us, do all the fun stuff.
And
Nice.
I'm Melodie KG. You can find me on Twitter at the world_on fire.
Thank you.